Hello, I really miss you, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you because you are a legend in my eyes and in many other people's. I am wanting to talk to you about performing. One of the reasons that I and Claire, that we are initiating these conversations is that we don't have many conversations about the how to perform. A more common conversation is what I did and who it was with and the style of the movement or, referenceable kinds of things. But we are interested in getting down to the nitty-gritty of the mechanisms behind performing and how it is that we do what we do. So to get into that conversation, I like to ask performers and people what they think this elusive it is, it being in air quote marks. From my experience and from my education and from my career, it's been quite rare that I have been told how to perform something, and it's kind of just been assumed of me to either switch it on once I get on stage, or that it is just something that is inherent within me, and that is maybe a reason why somebody hired me or something like that. Yeah, I want to try to figure out what this it is that performers apparently have and sort of demystify it and debunk it a little bit. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Hey, Louella. I miss you too, and I'm very excited to be in conversation with you because this week is the performance, is a week of performances at Dance House called Now Pieces as part of an event, the finale. Last night I curated and then watched 7 different sort of strategies for performance unfold, and they were the kind of artists that were on last night were intergenerational, they were interdisciplinary, they were intercultural. And I just want to say something about this word cultural, because it's, we're really trying to expand sort of a diversity of cultures and ethnic origins in the people that are gathered to perform, because in contemporary dance and in improvisation, as I understand it and as I practice it, it's a kind of conceptual improvisation, or it's an improvisation that has its origins in North America and maybe Northern Europe. And so, historically and currently, it's very white, the bodies that come to it. And so other kinds of improvisation like street dance or hip hop, there are different kinds of bodies that are attracted to it because they have a different origin. So we're thinking of culture in that way, but we're also thinking of dance as culture. And I think performance is cultural, as in there's different cultures of it. And when I think of that in those terms, I think of like sourdough culture. I think of like the mother, the thing that starts it all, and how bacteria spreads. And it's a bit hard to talk about bacteria in this COVID times, but how things evolve and mutate and spread from body to body. Maybe it's the perfect conversation to have, but that's what happens with a sourdough culture. This living organisms form inside, and then you can take a bit of that culture and give it to someone else, and then they can, make kombucha from it. And it's this living, growing thing that you can sort of trace back its origins, but also it's transformed and it's become this other thing. And also, something that really interests me in performing is when the unconscious is really at play. And so there's all these surprises that surprise the person who's doing it as well as the people who are watching it. And yeah, there's really I've been thinking a lot about choreography and magic, and there was really a magic in the room last night. And sometimes I think I've heard Andrew Morrish say before that sometimes when you're improvising, when you're performing, the fairies are in the room. And when the fairies are in the room, you just have to ride the flow. That's, as a performer. But when the fairies don't always visit, they don't always come in. And when they don't come in, that's when you need all the tools. That's when you need your practice, because then you have to work. You have to just work to survive it, to stay alive in it, and to not get so defeated that you drown or never stand up again. Yeah, but the fairies were definitely in the room last night, and that when that happens, like there's a wave that comes in, and that wave is beyond the individual performer, the human, but it's a kind of energy that rolls like a thunderstorm into the room, and the whole of the audience is present with the performer. You can feel it, can't you, when the audience is really present with you, and time is really elastic.
Magic and choreography. This reminded me of a book that I read called The Infra World by Francois J. Bonnet. And he spoke in this book about how paying attention to invisible things is something that he sees and encouraged society to see as a form of intelligence, because it means that you're not just your hierarchy of senses is kind of dissolved, and that you are open to possibilities and potentiality. Another thing that I was wondering is if there is a particular element to your practice or tools that you use or words or experiences or anything that you can remember learning and having this moment of yes, this is a tool for me. This is an opening for me. And these things that you, as Belfriend Starkey beautifully put it, kind of encode into choreography, or into your practice as a rich source for inviting the fairies.
Yes, yeah. So, in terms of paying attention to invisible worlds, I mean, I was really struck by the things that you said about that. And last week I started a new job. I am a part-time lecturer at the Victorian College of the Arts in dance. And today is my third day in the job. So I work 2.5 days a week. And I was making myself a cup of tea, and I met a colleague who works in musical theatre. Now, I've known this person, Margot Fenley, for about 25 years. And I said to her, hey, Margot, do you want to go for a walk with me? And could you show me the acting studios? Like, where do you guys work? So Margot and I walked around, and I went into all these other studios that is used for acting and theatre, musical theatre, production. We went to the costume department. It was so great. And I found like little rooms that I just felt like, oh yes, this feels better for me. So I was walking with Margot, and we went into these other spaces, and I said to her, wow, these spaces have such a different atmosphere. And Margot said, oh yeah, I teach a class on atmosphere. And so we started talking about that. It's a Michael Chekhov acting technique where you work with the atmosphere in the room, but you also fictionalize atmospheres. So you might, you're in a room and you try and identify the sort of the atmosphere in the room, and then you kind of change it. So by asking mainly what if questions, what if the room is filled with suspicion, or is filled with an erotic charge, how would you move in that room? Or there's been a really big fight and you've just walked into the silence afterwards. Anyway, I found that really fascinating, and I feel like dance deals also with atmosphere. And in terms of your question about learning and encoding, I wonder if there's something there that I would really like to start playing with, so that when I start practicing and moving, I work with atmospheres, real, imagined, memories, and fictions. What's really fascinating for me that seems to be coming up in our conversations is the relationship between the tangible and the intangible when it comes to performance.
Hello, Amaara. I hope this voice message finds you very well in your busy and new and dynamic life and work that you're getting into at the moment. To wrap up this divergent conversation, I'd just like to ask you, what are 3 intangible things that you connect with in performance, and 3 tangible things that you connect with in performance? Or it doesn't have to be 3, it could be 1 or whatever you feel is relevant. For example, for me, something intangible that I connect with in performance is I sometimes imagine that I'm in my living room, especially if it's a space that we've been rehearsing in and have the, set if there is one, and lighting if there is one. If I've been in the space for a while, I consider it to be my living room, and that I've invited the audience to come like into my home, and I just sort of show them what I get up to behind closed doors, and that image helps me to let people in more, I think, to what I'm doing and how I'm thinking, and gives me the confidence and comfort to be seen and to share what I'm sharing. And a tangible thing that I connect with in performance, an example of that would be that I like to touch every single part of my body before I go on stage. But I'm looking forward to hearing your answers, and thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you face to face very soon. Ciao.
Well, conversation is very tangible to me, this back and forth between us. And that is something that I connect with in performance. And I imagine conversations to be between me and the space, between me and the audience, between me and the other performers. And sometimes conversation is part of the score that I'm performing, and sometimes it's a task that I use, or a strategy that I use. So tasks are another tangible thing, movement tasks, language tasks, especially when I'm improvising. Sometimes a task can really help. It can help with the limits and the constraints. And the other tangible thing that I connect with in performance is, I think, words. the materiality of language. Yeah, I really like using words. And the intangible things that I connect to in performance are, well, memory is the first thing that comes to mind. I often, when I'm practicing, when I'm performing, well, it depends on what I'm performing actually, but memory certainly plays a role. And then on the other side of that is fictions, things that I invent or tell myself, or what if questions, or imagining that the space is like it's the floor is really oily. And then this makes me then question, well, a lot of the movement tasks I do are to do with imagination. So are they tangible or intangible? But I guess it's not one or the other, but that the tangible and the intangible are in relation. They're relational. So when I say to myself, seaweed, and that affects my movement, it passes from being something kind of intangible, just a word I said to myself, and then it shows up somehow. And the other intangible thing that I really love to play with is the space between us. That could be us, could be me and the audience, or the me and the other performers. I really love to play with proximity and distance and touch, closeness, farawayness, sending you a big hug, a big tangible, intangible